Night Dreams Talk Radio, After Dark, wants to give a big shout out to all the truckers that listen to our show. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
And that is me with our guest tonight, Whitley Strieber. We're talking about the coming global superstorm, and then we're going to be talking about a new world. I'll tell you one thing, of anybody, I've never met Whitley, but when me and Art would talk, he would bring up Whitley's name quite often. I almost feel like I'm a friend of his. Anyway, Whitley, how you doing?
Well, I'm fine, thanks.
Anyway, yeah, I don't know, with the magnetic fields changing the core of the Earth and all this stuff, it's just strange what's going on. I'm just worried that some parts of this world, I don't know if I'm wrong or not, could go into a mini ice age, while other parts could go into a desert.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things that I think is likely to happen in the United States and in southern Canada is a decrease in rainfall as the climate warms, and the result of this will be that the temperature differential between the lower and upper atmosphere will get less and less, and there will be fewer and fewer storms until finally there isn't enough vertical air circulation to generate them. Like, for example, last summer was an exceptional summer in the sense that there were practically no tornadoes, and that it might be that violent winter weather is going to be the only violent weather they have in that area. We'll have to see. It won't happen. There still are going to be tornadic springs and falls especially, but we might not see as much, and the less we see of that, the more likely it becomes that we're going to be looking at less rainfall, and that, of course, is that area of the world feeds the world. Without wheat and corn from that region, inevitably there will be famines breaking out in different parts of the world. Not here, because it's hard to believe that with the Ogallala aquifer being so huge, and it's only been tapped 9% so far, that we would have an immediate need for water in a lot of that area, that it could be pumped out of the ground. But there would not be, you would not find the United States and Canada exporting extensive amounts of wheat, soy, and corn.
I think you're totally right. You know, one thing I found strange here, a couple months ago, some of the biggest bottling companies came into Washington State and started buying water rights for underground water wells and all that. And I found that really, really strange. Why all of a sudden they were buying huge amounts of it? And it hit our local news, and I kind of scratched my head. Are they looking at the future?
Well, yeah, of course they are. That's why they want to buy water.
I know,
and it's deeply wrong. Of course, I mean they want to profit off of desperation, and that's not a good thing, because that causes things like the French Revolution, and they forget that people who are in trouble, especially when their food supply, they're deprived of food, they get really mean. They get really scared, and the next thing you know, they are marching in the streets. That's exactly what happened in France. In the late 18th century, France began to experience drought and famine that most people in France in those days had never known famine any more than we had. It had been hundreds of years since anyone in France experienced any real hunger except for the extremely poor. Now suddenly, the middle class and the working class were all experiencing extreme famine, but not the aristocracy. The reason the aristocracy wasn't was the same reason that the United States and Canada won't, even when they're not producing as much food. It was because the aristocrats were still producing enough food for themselves on their estates, but they didn't have any left to sell. And when they couldn't sell any, then the average person found no bread in the stores.
Yeah,
and people find no bread in the stores, you're in trouble. Any government whose people end up starving is in immediate trouble. That's what happened in the Middle East. I laughed sadly when I saw the media crowing about the Arab Spring as if finally the Arabs are going to have democracies. And I thought, they don't even understand why this happened. It happened because of a drought in the Ukraine and southern Russia in the wheat belt, and both countries cut off exports, meaning that the price of bread, of the flat bread that is eaten in that area of the world, and they import virtually 100% of their wheat from the Ukraine and southern Russia, the prices went through the ceiling. And it all started when a man in, I believe, in one of the more stable of those countries, not a democracy, but one of the more stable of those countries, tried to sell fruit on the street corner to raise money, and the police forced him to stop, and he set himself on fire, and that did it. People couldn't buy bread. They were furious at their governments from one end of the Middle East to the other, and they went into the streets. And we are still suffering from it right now, this moment. There are 1 million people caught between the advancing army of Assad and the very heavily guarded Turkish border. 1 million people. And Assad's completely ruthless. You could see a megadeath among those people. I think that army could easily kill very substantial numbers of them. And there's a reason for this. There's a reason for always a reason for these things that usually aren't understood. The reason Assad, of all of the dictators, there was no change there, was that they were literally fighting for their life. His tribe controls that country. It's a small tribe, I believe they're called the Alawites, compared to the other tribes in the country. They control it by force of arms, the same way the Shia, I believe, controlled Iraq. And if they lose, they die. They'll be killed. They'll all be killed, and they know it, and that's why they fight. And they're going to win their fight, and it's going to be at the cost of many lives. This is all due. It all started with a drought in the Ukraine and southern Russia.
Well, a lot of wars and a lot of this type of nature has happened because of food shortages in the past. Absolutely.
Yeah, people go on the march when there are food shortages. This happens again and again and again in this world, in every country in the world, and we are really foolish to forget that. This country, for example, has never had food shortages. If, God forbid, that does happen, beyond where I was talking about before, I mean, there could come a time when we can't even supply enough wheat and corn for ourselves, and if that happens, yeah, people are going to be real mad. And if a government that is in global warming denial is in office at that time, they can expect to be run out of town on a rail. I wouldn't be surprised to see the White House under siege under such circumstances.
Well, I hate to say it, the politicians are in denial yet of global warming.
They all are. Every one of them. Both parties. I mean, if they hadn't been, Barack Obama would have been much more aggressive about the environment than he was, and he would have been leading rather than following on climate change. But he was mostly silent on climate change because it wasn't a popular subject. And of course, when I'm losing my train of thought here. I was expecting to talk about a new world, and I'm sort of having to dig for all of this detail. In any case, we'll have to go on to another question.
Okay. Well, why don't we actually start in about the new world?
Okay.
What made you decide to come out with this book?
Well, it started in February of 2016. I was very concerned about environmental leadership, just what we were just talking about, actually. And I was asking the visitors and saying, if you would, and I have a pretty direct relationship with them. Two things. I do not know what they are. I would not necessarily say they're aliens from another planet. My experience of them is that they enter the physical world either through technology or naturally, and they go out of it just as easily. I don't know whether that means they have invisibility technology or it's something biological with them or what it is exactly. But I do know this. When I see them physically, it's rare, and it's very brief, and it's very controlled. Okay, that said, I still communicate with them extensively. I have this implant in my left ear, which works really well, and it is it is in part a communications device. So I was engaging with them, and they were very uncomfortable because I was pleading with them and saying, all you need to do is spend 10 minutes over New York City or some big city like that, and people are primed now. They will realize that you're real, and that would then empower all of the people in the world whom you have left this message of danger, in environmental danger, and that is almost the whole close encounter community. So they got angry and upset, and they were saying that they can't communicate with us. And I was saying, you don't even need to. All you need to do is this, and let us we'll take it from there. So they continued on this communications thing, and finally, what happened was they apparently decided to help me take another step so that there could be richer communication. And I woke up in the middle of the night one night. I meditate at 11 and at 3 every night anyway. This is about 4:30. I woke up and there was something between my legs in the bed. Now, as I have no dogs or cats, it was February and the windows were all closed.